Penn State fans, you know what week it is. It's Land Grant Trophy week. Penn State, Michigan State, Saturday in East Lansing. But we're going to talk about that later in the week. It's happy Thanksgiving to everyone. We're going to do another podcast, Bob Flounders with Dave Jones. So we're going to talk about James Franklin's Tuesday news conference, and we're going to talk about, he had kind of hinted, Dave, on Saturday that he might have some news for us about his, where he's going to be in 2022. But it turns out, and we can explain why, but I mean, it just turns out that we really don't have an update on that, but we do have some thoughts about what he's trying to do, with what's going on this week. How are you?
Not me, Bob. I'm concerned about Maryland Rutgers, so I'm celebrating that. It's one of my many shirts. Talk about a non sequitur for this week, right?
That looks like one of your newer ones.
Yeah, I got it when Josh was a quarterback. So that weekend. I'm being that this is 2:10 on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw out a big picture viewpoint of this thing because I don't think this part will change by the time this goes up. I don't understand how, and I think we all get along pretty well with Franklin. I enjoy having him to talk to. I think he's respectful. I think he's not somebody.
Do a nice impersonation of him. You do a pretty good impersonation of him.
Yeah, I'm working on the impersonation. So it's not that, but I don't understand how it's a statement on where college football is, that he continues to hold Penn State hostage for more money, more facilities, more whatever, after basically going 11-9 in the last 2 years. And I gotta give Corey Geiger actually credit for writing a really good column on this last night before I wrote it. I mean, I would have written exactly what he wrote because it's true. I read it this morning and I was like, geez, this is exactly how I feel about it, because it's not like we don't value him as somebody who I can express himself extemporaneously, who's easy to deal with, who treats people with respect. But I mean, fans are like, what is wrong with this picture? And I understand it. How is it that a guy can underperform, his team underperformed this much in 2 years, and he's angling for more leverage, a greater contract? I still am mystified about, well, I'm not mystified because I expected it. That's the state of college football right now. But the bigger picture is, do you remember last year at this time when all these athletic directors were talking about how much of the hundreds of millions of dollars lost because of COVID? What happened to that? What happened to that exactly? What happened to all this? Oh, what are we going to do? The crocodile tears about not enough money. Oh, there seems to be enough money all of a sudden. You're talking about Mel Tucker with a $90 million contract and whatever this turns out to be at Penn State. I said then and I say now, it's all BS. It really is. There's so much money in this business. And the other thing is, NIL was going to ruin NIL freedom for players. It's going to ruin the college game. Have you noticed any problem with NIL at all? Has this taken any of the fun? It never was going to take any funding out of the programs.
Right.
It's simply putting some of this huge stockpile of cash in the pockets of the people who actually are the product, the players. Has anyone talked about how NIL freedom has ruined the college game? No. And this is where we are in college football. So there, I got that off my chest, which has nothing to do with Michigan State, but I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, like you said, Dave, this is the first of two podcasts we're going to do. And like you did say, it's about 2:15 on Tuesday. He talked from 12:30 to a little after 1. There's supposed to be a meeting at Penn State a little bit later today to approve some things. A meeting's been called. And James did say that he expects, I think he is going to maybe address this a little bit more in detail after Wednesday's practice. Who knows? He told us on Saturday he was going to have something to say on Tuesday. But I think what Dave and I are trying to say is there should be some form of news, good or bad, about his future, by Thanksgiving. But we're just not really prepared to kind of, we don't want to speculate. So once we do have the news, we'll talk about it.
I've made my prediction, and maybe I'll be wrong, and I'll admit I was wrong if it turns out I am wrong. But I don't think he's going to commit until after Michigan State. No, we'll see. We will see. Because I think he can smell a win. So let's get into Michigan State here. First, he had some things to say about the flu, and that 35 guys had the flu. One funny thing he said is that 14 of them tried to play
through it,
and they all thought they were going to be Michael Jordan in the flu game in Game 5 of the '97 finals in Salt Lake City, and it didn't turn out that way.
Sean Clifford tried to give it a go. Caden Wallace tried to give it a go. Probably some others did, and it just. Hey, the flu is no joke, and I did find it a little bit interesting, Dave. Maybe you didn't, but his thoughts on a lot of players just don't have flu shots.
Because they're a little bit fatigued of getting shots. Well, I got my flu shot, man. I'm an old man. Kids don't think they have to worry about it. And I don't know how you were when you were 22, but you would, if your mom told you, to a flu shot, and I don't need a flu shot, and then you got the flu and you were absolutely miserable. Hey.
Yeah.
Once you go through it, he said, now that these guys went through it, maybe they have a different outlook on flu shots, and he thinks that will mitigate the problem next fall.
Yeah, 35 guys in all, 21 missed the game, 14 tried to play through it. Not all of them did. He did say a lot of those guys, including Sean Clifford, are feeling a lot better. He also said since that day, since Saturday, some other players are now dealing with it. He said it's usually about a 3-day process, give or take, depending on how they respond to the IVs. But, it is, you just wonder, I don't know about you, Dave, but just because you're over the flu, it doesn't necessarily mean your body is completely 100%, even though you're feeling better. You just wonder if there'll be any lingering effects. But, that's a pretty, I never remember a Penn State team that had the flu this bad. Do you?
Well, as far as the percentage of guys from a team, no. In football, usually it happens more in basketball because you only have like 8 guys who are real contributors a lot of times. And if 5 of them go down, it's big trouble. I mean, that's most of your team. And then you got trouble. This was pretty bad for a football team. Also, he said that Clifford was not feeling great on Sunday, but was better on Monday. And is back to normal today. So I think we can count on him starting in East Lansing on Saturday. That's probably good news that they have 2 guys now. For the first time this year, they have 2 dependable quarterbacks.
Yeah, we were this close. I think it would have been a little bit interesting to me just to see because like he even said what you said on Saturday, Dave. He said, I wouldn't necessarily trust the starting lineup that they had on the video board. And they were legitimately preparing to have Mason Stahl be the guy against Rutgers. I would have been curious to see that, just to compare that experience to maybe, even though it was a home game and Taekwon was on the road at Iowa, and it's 2 different environments. I was a little curious to see how that would play out. 2 completely
different environments, and Veilleux probably could have done fine against Rutgers. It's Rutgers. Did you hear that he said the one drive that Temple had in the game, he called Rutgers Temple. He's doing it again. And boy, that's an indictment, huh?
Yeah. He's just he's not that good with his memories. Hasn't been that great this year either, Dave.
Yeah, you think he's distracted by something?
Do you want to just talk at all? Do you have any thoughts at all? I know you touched upon it a little bit and how it's BS, but his answers about the facilities and how they're behind and they didn't pay attention to it. It just seems to be a deflection on his point.
It's disingenuous is what it is.
Yeah.
Was the Illinois game lost because they didn't have mood lighting in their locker room? Is that what happened there? Come on. You know,
Is that why Chase Brown now has the Beaver Stadium record for most rushing yards against a Penn State team? That's just unbelievable.
No, they didn't have enough nutrition to beat Illinois. No, I don't think so.
It was a smoothie issue, Dave. Otherwise, they wouldn't going away. The smoothie issue. You know what's funny, Dave? I was thinking about that, and I want to tie it in because I enjoyed it. But I enjoyed seeing Matt Millen on Saturday before the game. He was spending some time talking to you, Matt. You know, the Penn State great called did the color for the Big Ten Network game, and what we're just talking about now with facilities and nutrition, I always just harken back to the days that Matt was at Penn State and the facilities there. And he probably his diet probably was just cheeseburgers. And I just wonder when he hears stuff like this, what he really thinks.
Yeah. And I mean, that was the most badass defense in Penn State history. Are we wrong? 1978.
In the conversation, man.
Yeah,
in the
1978, when they went up against Alabama at the end and they were that close. That's got to be in the conversation from the nastiest defense in the history of the program. Do you think they had smoothie bars in that program?
He wouldn't have drank one. He would have had milk and cheeseburgers. I guarantee you.
Yeah. By the way, Matt,
pearls with cinder blocks instead of like weight.
Yeah. We were reminiscing about his meeting with Randy White when he was recruited, which is on the Football Life thing. Yeah, it's a lot of that's the age we're in, man. We're 40 years down the line and nothing's the same. So you got to compete the way you got to compete. So as Franco would say, I get it. I understand that, but come on, you don't need this. His problem is player development. I think they're getting adequate recruits. You could argue that they haven't recruited offensive tackles, would you say? Or if you had to isolate one or two positions, what have they not recruited adequately?
The offensive line this year it stands out. It sticks out like a sore thumb, Dave. And the thing that's really it vexes me, I'm going to use that word. They were able to run the ball when they wanted to last year. They were able to run the ball with Journey Brown in 2019 down the stretch. So part of it might just be the running backs are just kind of maybe one-dimensional and not necessarily athletically gifted. But the other part is a couple of these running backs were able to run the ball awfully well last year, and that was pretty much the same offensive line. So you just wonder what has changed. They got a new offensive coordinator, obviously, but I just wonder about what, in terms of technique and strength training and all that, what's going on up front with that offensive line. I just can't. It's very puzzling to me.
My point is, if you were going to isolate any position that they haven't recruited adequately, that might be the only one, right? Offensive tackle, they've got guards, they've had decent centers, and they've had every other position: corners, safeties, linebackers, certainly defensive linemen of all stripe, quarterbacks, running backs. Wideouts have been a problem lately, but not so much now. Pretty good. The only position they haven't recruited adequately is offensive tackle. So is the problem recruiting? Is the problem that they don't have enough bells and whistles in their pitch to recruit good enough players to win? I don't think so. The problem is development. And this is not going to help that. Whatever he gets out of this thrust for more money, more facilities, more, different colors for the nameplates on the lockers. I mean, Jesus. I mean, it's to me, I understand the way fans must feel at this point, but you're trying to recruit kids who are so they're so enraptured by shiny objects, and they are, because that's the age that we're in. So he's got to be he has to be expedient, and he has to do whatever works. So I guess he understands, but still, I just can't. I can't get into it. Anyway, enough of that crap. I thought it was interesting. They put in a silent count because Clifford's voice was shot.
Yeah, I mean, you know what?
That was some new news.
That makes a lot of sense. And we were, before the game, we were wondering if there was something up with him, and you could just tell he was. I mean, apparently a lot of players were literally getting IVs instead of coming out for warmups. People were getting sick at the pregame breakfast. It's just, and they didn't get the flu shot. I know it's not necessarily a guarantee, but it just that's just such a big number of people to be stricken. But I don't know. I do know that when we talk about Michigan State and this challenge, Michigan State doesn't look nearly as formidable, Dave. And you were talking about it yesterday with me because of some issues with them, and they're coming off just got overwhelmed by Ohio State's offense, and they have some injury issues. And you just wonder, 8-4 is certainly possible now for Penn State, which is about where maybe some people thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. It's just been a weird year.
Yeah. We talked about that Ohio State game, and I had to take the opportunity to mention all the 5 upsets of Ohio State by Michigan State when they were in this position, while not really expecting it to happen at all. I thought the game would be something like 60-35. I did not think that Michigan State would be so stoned on offense, so that was kind of a surprise. But there's no way you weren't surprised that you were surprised about Michigan State. Their secondary is historically bad. They are up to 361 yards per game passing allowed. I still have not gotten from Team Rankings an answer on whether that's an NCAA record, and the NCAA stats are so skewed you can't even find that stat, but it might be an NCAA record with one game to go. 361 yards passing allowed per game. I mean, that's insane, and it's 40 more than anybody else in college football. Duke is second with 329, I think it is, 319. And I asked Ben Jones, I think, asked whether you just go at that secondary or you stick with your game plan. Franklin said you stick with your game plan. You don't want to get too skewed, which I kind of agree with, because you can do a lot of things on that defense. Offense is what they do well. Peyton Thorne, Naylor and Reed and the wideouts, and a really good running back in Kenneth Walker. So that's what Penn State, it kind of works to their strength too, because I think they can handle Michigan State's offense. So suddenly you've got a very strange dynamic going where Michigan State, after getting firebombed like that, psychologically, this is what I asked Franklin, because all my questions were eaten up by the time I got to mine with about the 7th question, which I wanted to ask him about this contract and all this crap too. But he stonewalled it anyway. But I said, what have you done? I mean, they had a couple of games at Michigan where they were beaten that way. What do you do? You have their ears more than you would have after a game like that? Or are you just preoccupied with building them up psychologically after getting a KO? I mean, that's like a Tyson KO in a situation like that. And you may have to, he said it's a challenge. And I think it is going to be a challenge for Mel Tucker, because something like that after a season like this, after 9-1, that doesn't happen very often, where a team just gets obliterated in week 12. It doesn't happen very often. It's a real challenge for Mel Tucker. Plus, he's got his own contract noise going on with supposedly getting a 10-year, $90 million contract offered to him. So there's a lot going on.
Dave, this is the thing that's even more amazing about the pass defense in Michigan State. If you take CJ Stroud out of the equation, and yes, he did, was like 32 of 35, whatever it was. There's no other good quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and they've given up all these yards to it's not a quarterback league. I mean, it's not like they are sophisticated passing offenses, and they're just getting trampled.
Yeah, I mean, they made
McNamara threw for 700 yards, I think.
I was going to say they made Caden McNamara look like
We
some
saw him
sort of,
against Penn State. He's okay. They just run crossing routes. That's all
yeah.
they
It was
did.
like it was like BYU. I mean, he had, what did he have? 375 against Michigan State.
I
Something
think
like
at least, yeah, like something
career
like that.
career day. They had a situation where I thought, did you go back and watch the Ohio State tape of Michigan State?
I did. I just didn't have time. Sorry.
Well, I didn't. I did because I have to for the power poll. And their DC, Scotty Hazelton, I didn't think he really, I think in their situation, you got to absolutely sell out on blitzes, weird blitzes from weird angles, send a corner at Stroud, do anything to hit him. And they didn't do that. They kind of played vanilla. They blitzed 6 one time and went up the middle, and Ohio State's offensive line gummed that up. And man, you can't give Stroud a chance. Even Clifford can do, if you don't pressure Clifford can do with his wideouts, even with Dotson and Washington and Lambert Smith, something like what Ohio State did. So given that Clifford's been hurt, I would expect what we thought Rutgers would do is to throw the kitchen sink at Clifford and try to get to him, because this secondary is untenable. I mean, they're just really, really bad, really bad.
Yeah. Dave, Rutgers obviously not representative of a quality program at this point when Penn State plays them. But what did you just think of physically of Veilleux's effort against them? I know that they're by no means a formidable foe, and that he did get them at home. What did you think? What you saw? Maybe arm strength. It looked like he certainly had plenty of gumption. He was courageous. He was unafraid to run the ball. He's a big kid. I didn't realize how big he was until when we were waiting for some interviews after the game. He ran out onto the field to talk to some people. He looks slender from the press box, but he's a little bit bigger than I realized.
Well, first of all, and I had the lead written before I even went down for questions. And then Franklin pretty much read my lead out loud, because it's true. I was talking to you and talking to
Rich Scarcella.
Rich before the game. He was like, and I knew the question. That was the question I was going to ask, because I knew the fans would want to know it. Why wasn't Veilleux the second string quarterback back for Iowa? Well, who's to say what would have happened if Veilleux goes in Iowa City? You're talking about, of all the possible situations, venue, time of the year, opponent, it could not have been a greater difference between playing Rutgers in a no consequences game in the third week of November and playing Iowa in an all consequences game in Iowa City, in Kinnick, in front of those drunken farmers. It could not have been a more stark difference. So who's to say if Veilleux wouldn't have done what Roberson did? You can't even say that. That given, I thought Veilleux looked really good. I mean, he needed a couple series to get going, but I talked to Dotson after the game, and we all did, about his demeanor. I said, if you look in somebody's eyes, sometimes I think it's fun to watch place kickers during games, where if you get a tight shot, or free throw shooters, if you get a tight shot of their eyes, you can see kids who believe they're going to succeed. And I asked Dotson if he got a look in Veilleux's eyes to see what his demeanor was like. He goes, it wasn't even a question for me, because we know that he has a great sort of confidence and demeanor. We knew that ahead of time. I didn't even have to look, he answered that right away, which meant I thought he was not BSing, that's the way he really thought. So that's a good spot to begin with. But again, Veilleux had a chance to stick a toe in the water of the baby pool, while Roberson was thrown off the deck of a tanker in the middle of the Pacific. It's not the same thing at all.
Yeah, and just Dave, the difference, just being the difference between number 2 and number 3 on the depth chart really impacts your ability, I think, to develop, because the number 3 guy is I don't want to say he's an afterthought. James said like Sunday scrimmages really helped him get up, but you just don't get any looks with the first team guys, you're just kind of standing around, I think, a lot at practice. He didn't play in 2020 because his school, because of the COVID year. So he's a January enrollee, but he's very raw. And, Mike Yurcich is tasked with improving Sean Clifford, and that's his priority. And he's putting in his offense. He doesn't know what he has in Roberson other than the fact that he's been here longer than Veilleux. So I can almost see why it was Roberson, not Veilleux, in the Iowa game. But I think if there's one blessing, it's then Penn State kind of found out. I think that they saw Roberson a little bit. I know it was a hectic environment, a tough task, but I think they got a better read on what maybe his upside was, and I think they committed a little bit more to Veilleux on the practice field after that.
I'll reserve judgment because I'll give you another example. Is you remember Trace McSorley against Georgia?
Yeah.
In the Gator Bowl, that was a legit defense. That was, and you saw a thing in that kid right away. I would rather see a step up in competition before we say this kid has what it does.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that I think they begin to ramp up Veilleux after the Iowa game just to see what they have in him. That's what I mean. I know that maybe if he plays a Michigan team or a Wisconsin team, it's probably not going to go very well for him. But I think they learned things. They learned something about Taekwon, and they were probably intrigued by his Veilleux's skill set, and they're like, well, let's give him a little rope and see what he can do. Yeah,
I think one thing to watch for is the bowl game, and a lot of bowl games. Paterno used to do this. Many other coaches have done this. You throw in the backup in meaningful minutes, especially in a bowl game like Vegas or Nashville or wherever the hell they're going. You can throw in the backup in meaningful minutes and see what he does. I think we will probably see that. And you don't know what Clifford's going to do, but we've talked about that before. It's probably better that Clifford move on. So if they have any inkling that he will, why not give Veilleux a real shot in that bowl game? Maybe not at Michigan State, but certainly in the bowl game.
Yeah. So let's wrap up this Blue-White Breakdown podcast with this. We're going to have another one. We're going to make some game picks, but we're also hopefully, depending on how the rest of Tuesday shakes out, we might be able to talk a little bit more about James, what he's going to do, where he's headed, what 2022 looks like. Then again, maybe we won't, but we just can't. There was nothing concrete that came out of his news conference today, so we're just going to wait.
Put it this way. I will not be surprised if nothing is concrete even through Wednesday. So if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. All right.
You're probably right on this one because these things do tend to drag out. They always do.
Yeah, this particular one, I think.
We'll see you guys. We'll see you guys a little bit later, and who knows what we're going to be talking about.